Hello, welcome to part two of the Basal Breakdown. My name is Savannah Campbell, and I have started this series because I see a real need for teachers right now. All across the country, there's legislation that is being put out that is requiring districts to adopt curriculum from approved textbooks. And I think that it can be very overwhelming for teachers who may have been cobbling together their own curriculum thus far to then be presented with a textbook and just say, use this with fidelity. Someone on my Instagram today said something that I absolutely loved. And she said that my principal told me that we don't implement the program with fidelity, we implement it with integrity. And integrity means we keep the skills in mind, but we acknowledge that we are going to have to make some shifts in our instruction in order to best serve all of the kiddos that we have in front of us. So that's what the Basal Breakdown is here for. I'm coming at you every single week so that we can talk about some small, meaningful shifts that we can make from our basal to improve student outcomes. Last week in part one, we started talking about building background knowledge and creating text sets. And today we're going to continue the conversation around comprehension. I have two more tips for you for things that you could do with whatever text you have in front of you. The first one is to teach pronoun references. And this is something that I never really thought of in terms of comprehension, right? Because what we normally see is something like this. Mark went to the store to get groceries. Blank forgot the milk. And then it's like, okay, well, which pronoun would work here? But that is not going to improve comprehension. That might tell you whether or not a child knows a pronoun, but that's not where pronouns matter when it comes to comprehension. Let me show you what I mean. This is a passage from Alice in Wonderland. You'll notice that I have highlighted 5 it's. And as I'm reading this, I want you to think about what each of these pronouns represents. You ready? So I'm going to start right here where it says suddenly. Suddenly she came upon a little 3-legged table, all made of solid glass. There was nothing on it except a tiny gold key. What's this first it? A 3-legged table. And Alice's first thought was that it might belong to one of the doors of the hall. The second one, now we're talking about the key. But alas, either the locks were too large or the key was too small, but at any rate, now what's the it? Back to the key, would not open any of them. However, on the second time round, she came upon a low curtain she had not noticed before, and behind it, what's the it here? The curtain, was a little door about 15 inches high. She tried the golden key in the lock, and to her great delight, it fitted. What's the it? The it here is the key. And look at this. I think this is only 2 sentences. 2 sentences, 5 pronouns referring to 3 separate subjects. That is where comprehension breaks down. If we don't know what the pronouns are referring to when we're reading a text, then comprehension will break down because we just don't have an understanding of what's actually happening in the story. So I want to show you how I teach pronoun references to my kiddos. And it's going to be a little bit different because we're on the computer. But when I'm doing this, typically we have the paper in front of us, we have highlighters, and we have pencils. And what we do when we are reading a passage is we will highlight pronouns. I know that some of you might have textbooks that cannot be written in, so perhaps what you could do for those of you who are not able to write in your textbook, you could have like a clear sheet protector, like a dry erase sheet that goes over top of it that you allow them to annotate on, and then you can take it away later. But this way you can still have them doing the interactive component. Rosa Parks was tired, so let's go ahead and read this and I'll tell you kind of the strategy that we do. Rosa Parks was tired, but not just from a long day. She was tired of being treated unfairly. One evening in 1955, she got on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, and took a seat. A little while later, the driver told her, that's another one, to move so a white passenger could have the spot. She refused. So what we do is we highlight the pronouns. And in this first paragraph, it's pretty easy because all of these pronouns are referring back to Rosa Parks. So what we do is we use our highlighter to highlight the pronouns, and then we use our pencil to draw a line to what the pronoun is standing for. Let's take a look at this second paragraph because the second paragraph is a really good example of where comprehension can fall apart if we don't understand what the pronouns are referring to. The man insisted, but she stayed in her seat. Soon the police arrived and took her to jail. Many people in her community were angry about what had happened. They decided to stop riding the buses to protest the unfair rules. This boycott lasted for over a year, and it helped change them. Although it was difficult, they refused to give up because they knew it was important. What we do is we draw a line from the pronoun to the what the pronoun is standing for. So for example, here where it says they decided to stop writing, we would highlight they, and then we're going to draw a line over to people in her community. So you can see how this is tying it back to what it stands for. And how much easier is it going to be to understand this text if you know what this it is standing for? So here it says this boycott lasted for over a year and it helped change them. The them is referring to the unfair rules in the previous sentence. The it is going back to the boycott. Sorry, I didn't have that highlighted. But one easy practice you can do is have your kiddos identify the pronouns and then go back and find what the pronouns are standing for. You don't have to do it with every text, but when you have texts that are particularly heavy with pronouns, or the pronouns are referring to things in the middle of a sentence or from several sentences before, this is a very powerful strategy. Okay, let's talk now about writing about reading. That is my last tip, and it is a tip that you can use with any text. Tim Shanahan says that research shows that reading and writing are closely aligned. That is, reading and writing depend upon many of the same skills, strategies, and knowledge, though those are deployed in different ways in reading and writing. So, in fact, about 70% of the variation in reading and writing abilities are shared. What does this mean? When we read, it will help us to become better writers. When we write about what we are reading, it is going to help us understand what we have read better. Writing makes your learning sticky. And I'm going to share with you one strategy that you can use to have your students write about reading. This is called because, but, so. It's a very popular strategy. I first heard about it in the writing revolution. You can use this any grade, but the younger the kiddos are, you're going to have to do it orally, and you will probably only do the first two sentence stems. So what we do when we have the because, but, so strategy is this. You give your students a kernel of a sentence, like I love summer, a simple sentence. Then you invite them to create three complex sentences by using the conjunctions because, but, and so. Why is this powerful? This is powerful because is going to give an explanation, but is going to indicate a change in direction, and then so is kind of like a result of things. So with one single sentence stem, you are able to get your students to write or say three complex sentences that have different aspects of whatever content you're learning about. I suggest you start doing this orally with a sentence that is not connected to what you have read, because you have to have an understanding of what you've read to do this. So let's practice the strategy without having any text to read. And you can do it with something as simple as I love summer. So the way you introduce this is you give them a kernel, and then you're only going to introduce one of the complex sentences at a time. We're going to start with because it is the easiest for our students. So we would say, all right, we are going to learn today how we can create some complex sentences about different topics. And I would say, I love summer. Now I'm going to create a complex sentence by using the conjunction because, and then I'm going to give a reason why I love summer. Okay. I love summer because I get more time with my daughter. And then you get everybody in the room to talk about the reason they love summer, and they have to have it in a sentence. I love summer because. Then, and it's not even going to be on the same day, most likely. It might not even be in the same week or the same month. You're going to introduce but. And say, you know how we've been creating these complex sentences that include the conjunction because and give a reason for something? Well, today we are going to write a second complex sentence with the same sentence stem. This time, though, instead of giving a reason, we are going to use the conjunction but that is going to take the sentence in a different direction. So let me show you what I mean. If I said, I love summer, but I have to go in a different direction and talk about something that I don't love about summer. So I love summer, but I do not like the heat of summer. And once again, you get everybody to talk to you about their complex sentence. And then the last one is like a result, right? So I love summer, so I look forward to it each year. You do this orally. you do this with a non-threatening, non-reading related activity first, and you will see the benefits of it once you do then get into content. Because what happens is if you do this strategy well, your students cannot answer these questions or cannot create these complex sentences without having an understanding of the content. For example, say you are in a unit that is talking about different planets. Your simple sentence could be Pluto is no longer a planet. Okay? Fact, Pluto is no longer a planet because it doesn't clear its orbit. Pluto is no longer a planet, but many people still fondly remember it as one. And then Pluto is no longer a planet, so it is now classified as a dwarf planet. You see how if I don't have an understanding of the reasons why Pluto is no longer a planet, I will not be able to answer that? Using because, but, and so is a fantastic strategy for helping to ensure that your students are writing about what they're reading, and they're writing about what they're reading in a really meaningful yet structured way. I love this strategy. Hats off to whoever invented it. I first heard about it in the book, The Writing Revolution, and it's a great strategy for getting students to write about reading. And it can be nonfiction or fiction. For example, say you are reading a fiction story, and I'm struggling to come up with one. Okay, so what if we used holes, for example, and we said Stanley Yelnats believes he is cursed, right? Stanley Yelnats believed he is cursed because of his no good, dirty, rotten, pig stealing great great grandfather. I haven't read Holes in years and I still remember that. Okay, well, Stanley Yelnats believes he is cursed, but he's still trying his best to succeed. Stanley Yelnats believes he is cursed, so he ends up having to go to Camp Green Lake when he ended up going to Camp Green Lake when he was accused of stealing the shoes, right? You see how this can work for fiction or nonfiction. All right, those were the last of my tips for improving comprehension, even if you have to use a basal. I hope that this was helpful for you. Keep in mind, we're going to be writing about our reading, and we're going to be teaching about those pronouns within the text for our students. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, savannah@campbellcreatesreaders.com. I have a website where I share tons and tons and tons of content related to structured literacy. You can find me at Campbell Creates Readers on social media. And I have a podcast called Creating Readers with Savannah Campbell. My YouTube channel is still kind of new and getting out there, so I'd love it if you could give that a follow too. Thank you for being here, and I will be back next week with the third installment of the Basal Breakdown.